Hey there, Heather. Ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 baseball style video. And today, as I am rocking the Blue Jays light blue jersey, we're going to be looking at the top 10 MLB controversies of all time. Baseball can be a funny game sometimes, and these 10 controversies are basically it and all that. So, a lot of people are hoping for the best for their teams and all that. Here we go. Number 10 is the near perfect game from Armando Galarraga 2010. It was a stone cold day, June 2nd, 2010, as Armando Galarraga was within one inning of throwing a perfect game. No Cleveland Indian player had made it to first base by any means. Galarraga got the first two outs, and then he got a slow ground ball to short that easily thrown to first base. Mickey Cabrera should have caught the ball, but somehow I don't know. I can't remember. I would say Jason Kipp this, but I don't think that was him. But the Cleveland runner was called safe, and everyone was shocked, saying, "Oh my gosh, he missed the perfect game by just fractions of a second." The worst part was that Jim Joyce, who is a famous umpire who I liked watching as a umpire, like home plate umpire, would go strike like that. Anyway, Jim Joyce blew the call as the ball was completely in the first baseman's glove. And Galarraga should have had his perfect game and all that. It was massive. MLB would expand instant replay review, heated debate. But Jim Joyce made the right move. After the game, he gave interviews and said he kicked the shit out of that call. And he cost Galarraga the near perfect game. The perfect game. What's even more impressive was that Armando met Jim Joyce, and he didn't have a bad bone for Jim Joyce. Now that's perfect. Of course, another first baseman's call, first base umpire's mistake, 1985, Dankinger. Remember that? That was a humongous one. And it may have cost the Cardinals the World Series. Well, also the fact that Vince Coleman was injured, so they didn't have the speed at the top of the order, even though Tito Landrum, his replacement, actually did well. And the Cardinals, missing a pop up. Jack Clark missing a foul pop up, and then there were some miscommunication and basically them phoning it in for game 7. That's how we go. Number 9 is teams apparently buying the World Series. Yankees, Mets, and Dodgers among other teams. It's one of the biggest movements nowadays, and now we might be headed for a work stoppage after the 2026 season. Because our teams basically buy the World Series. We all know that has happened years gone by. The Marlins, 1997, massive example when they basically brought in these All Stars with all the money. And then after they won the World Series, bit by bit, they were running out of money, so they had to sell them off. It was just like unbelievable. But you think that's bad? Look at things in the 2020s. I mean, you have the Yankees and Mets always trying to buy the best players for massive deals, like Juan Soto getting a big deal. Who did the Yankees pick up? The Yankees picked up these guys for big buckles and all that. And, the Mets picking up Lindor. It has worked out. Lindor's done well. Soto, meh. The Mets do make the playoffs. The Yankees do make the playoffs. But nobody seems to be buying the World Series more than the LA freaking Dodgers. If you look at the Dodgers, you look at those contracts, especially to Ohtani and Kyle Tucker for $60 million a year, like with incentives, of course. But like, are you kidding me? You're pricing out many teams like the White Sox, the Royals, the Pirates, the Reds, like the small market teams, even the Blue Jays. Of course, that pisses me off in one for. But the fact is, the Dodgers team did nothing more but to circumvent salary cap rules, and it helped them win back-to-back World Series. But there will be a day of reckoning, I promise you that. Number 8 is the DH rule. Now, the designated hitter is obviously a hitter in the lineup that bats for the pitcher, if you will. Pitchers have had some good times hitting and all that. There have been, 16 or was it 15 pitchers hitting World Series home run, and Joe Blanton was the last one. Like, pitchers have had some good hitting performances. Rick Wise, 1971, he threw a no-hitter, but he also hit 2 home runs against the Reds. So, there's some pitchers. The American League had pitchers hit until 1973 because the AL pitchers usually couldn't hit for shit. Remember Mickey Lolich having one of the worst batting averages of all time, despite him hitting a home run in Game 2 of the 1968 World Series? But yeah, the AL said, "Screw it, we're gonna make a DH and we're gonna give more batters there and give pitchers more freedom to pitch because the pitchers would not have to worry about hitting terrible balls and costing the teams their games." So it was all debate over the purity and strategy. Like it was always the American League with the DH, the National League left it to the pitchers, and of course the World Series would have years in which 1 year would be no DH, one rule would be all DH, no matter what league. And also, they changed the rule to, the normal. But in 2022, the NL said, screw it, we'll do the DH too. The universal DH rule is in effect. I mean, it works out if you have these great bench players who would be on the bench in the list, but you give them some at bats and all that stuff. Like Kyle Schwarber has become a good NL DH and all that. And George Springer for the Blue Jays, well, he's not the DH. And all that, helping him not having to play in the field and all that. And yeah, when I do PC replay baseball, I have it all DH because you never know what an extra hitter could do. And the pitchers can pitch instead of having to hit and cough up. Number 7 is the infield fly rule from the 2012 wildcard game. So here's what the infield fly rule is: if there's runners on first and second and the ball's in the infield, the ball's popped up within the infield, it doesn't go into the outfield, they can call an infield fly rule and the runners can move at their own risk, but it's an automatic out. Well, that rule hit hard as the Braves and Cardinals would play in the first wild card game. Maybe be thinking, oh, are you stupid? Well, technically, the wild card had been around since 1995, but not a wild card game. It was one wild card and the 3 division winners. But now MLB, kind of because the Red Sox got hosed and so did the Braves in the final day of the 2011 season, they made it a rule that said 2 teams got into a wild card spot. They would play a 1-game wild card game and all that. The wild card game has produced some great moments. Well, of course, it's not now that again. It's 3 division winners and 3 wild card teams. But the wild card game was huge. I mean, after all, Blue Jay fans, we know about the wild card game. That was when Edwin hit the 3-run home run off of Ubaldo Jimenez to win the 2016 wild cards, forcing the Jays against the Rangers in the ALDS and sweeping them and all that. Anyhow, the 2012 wild card game was huge. Braves and Cardinals, the 2 teams that were involved in the 2011 wild card chase, when the Cardinals got it instead of the Braves, and the Cardinals won the World Series. In Atlanta, the Braves were running. There was a pop fly, and the outfielder couldn't make the play and all that. They miscommunication. Braves had the bases loaded, down 6-3 in the 8th. Or did they? Nope. The umpire called Sam Holbrook called infield fly, meaning that it was an out and the runners could move at their own advancement. And of course, since the runners moved on their own advancement, second and third with 2 outs instead of bases loaded with 1 out, the fans got pissed off and basically almost cost a forfeit. The Cardinals did win that game anyway, so. Number 6 is Jackie Robinson and integration. MLB had what they called a secret segregation, if you will. No black player had been in the major league since its adoption in 1901. And people like Kennesaw Landis, the commissioner, did not want black players on their team. Well, you got to remember the culture of the U.S. North versus South was way different in the 1950s and 60s as it is nowadays. Well, I know some say that it's happening now, but the South did not want to integrate as much. But yeah, Jackie Robinson was a great player, UCLA 4-sport man. He came to the Dodgers, signed a bench Ricky, plunked him in Montreal for the 1946 season to see what other cities would feel about Jackie being on the team. He did well for Montreal. Of course, Montreal welcomed him with open arms and all that. 1947, Brooklyn wasn't so sure. The Dodgers, as a team, weren't so sure. They signed a petition, but Pee Wee Reese ripped it up, saying, I'm the captain, what I say goes. And so he played for the Dodgers. He did have the N-words and spikes up on him, but it didn't hurt because Jackie Robinson won the Rookie of the Year in 1947, the MVP in 1949, and a World Series title in 1955. So he was worth it, and it brought better players like Cleveland. Larry Doby was the first American League player to break the color barrier in the American League. So the league would struggle with integration and equality, but it got downgraded. Number 5 is the Pine Tar incident with George Brett, 1983. So the Kansas City Royals were a decent team, and George Brett basically is the greatest Kansas City Royal of all time. Sorry, Bobby Witt Jr. But the fact is that Brett was a good hitter. The Royals went to the 1980 World Series, lost to the Phillies in 6, and people thought the Royals were going to be nothing more but next year's champs. However, in 1983, in a seemingly innocent game against New York Yankees, George Brett hit a 2-run home run off Goose Gossage to make it 5-4 Royals. Or did he? Billy Martin told the umpires that Brett used too much pine tar, and he did. It was past the whiff of home plate. He was out. Yankees won the game, and George Brett stormed out and tried to go after Tim McClellan, who was 6'3" as an umpire. That was a massive dramatic outburst for excessive pine tar on the bat. Now, AL President Lee MacPhail, when the AL President was worth something, said that it was illegal, but it didn't help the ball travel far. Pine tar doesn't really help the ball go far. It just helps the batter grip the bat better. So he declared that the Royals-Yankees game had to be redone. Royals a 5-4, George Brett's home run, and then they would replay from the 9th inning. But the Royals and Yankees both lost players during that time, and it was a clusterfuck. But the spirit of the rule, and also the Major League Baseball said that a manager had to inform someone before the home run or before the at bat happened about the violation and all that. Billy Martin was not too pleased. Number 4 is the trash cans of the Houston Astros. Oilers. I knew I would say that. So anyway, the Houston Astros were pretty good. They were a decent National League team. By the 2000s, they finally clicked and actually won a playoff series for the first time in their 40-plus year history. 2005, they got to the World Series to face the White Sox, got swept. But then Houston would go up and down, up and down, and up and down. With some young talent like Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa, they were looking pretty good. And in 2017, they shocked the world by winning the World Series against the LA Dodgers. Well, former Astro and current Blue Jay George Springer was a massive part of the Houston Astros thing. But yeah, Houston could hit baseballs and all that. It was amazing and all that. Astros were going to win the World Series. Unfortunately, though, years later, it was found out that the Astros were cheating with trash cans and high-tech equipment. John Boy Media did a video on this, and it made him popular and brought in the warehouse games for Blitzball. So, nevertheless, the Houston sign stealing scandal was amazing. It was huge. People wanted Houston to be stripped of their 2017 title because of that. But they couldn't do anything. Major League Baseball didn't vacate a championship now, and they didn't want to do it now. So anyway, the Astros tried to do all that. The Astros players trying to beg for forgiveness, but it sounded flat, and that 2017 title will always be tainted. Partially, it's tainted to me because I picked the Dodgers to win the World Series, but I refused. I take it as an L instead of a L. Yeah, I take it as an L. So yeah, there were suspensions, fines. AJ Hinch was booted for a year from being manager, and key 2 personnel was gone. Number 3 is the steroid era and performance-enhancing drugs. You didn't hear about steroids and performance-enhancing drugs much before the 1990s. Although in 1985, there were the Pittsburgh drug trials in which players were testifying about cocaine and all that, and Tim Raines basically stopped his cocaine habit. Anyhow, the late 90s, early 2000s saw steroids and performance-enhancing drugs be popularized, with Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro, and later on Alex Rodriguez being tainted, having their things tainted because of that stuff. To me, it's like, well, why would you do this? It was basically, the players were aging. Like Bonds and McGuire were aging. They had good careers before they even thought about steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. Barry Bonds was a multiple time MVP for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Mark McGuire was a home run star for the Oakland A's. They didn't need to take drugs. They would have had Hall of Fame based careers before all that. Barry Bonds had to have taken something because you don't hit 73 home runs when you're close to 40 years old and all that. And Mark McGuire took it to try to improve his stats. In 98, he did, and then he fell off the cliff by 2001. But yeah, it was amazing. Rafi Palmeiro got his 3,000 hit, but he was taking stuff all the time. Now, of course, the 90s, 2000s, there were rumors circulating that the steroids and performance-enhancing drugs were actually there to be investigated, but Bud Selig and Major League Baseball refused to, on the grounds that the home runs and the performances actually were helping baseball become popular. Because let's not forget, in 1994, they had that baseball strike that dragged on and claimed an early part of the 95 season. Baseball was now getting less popular than most sports. Well, every sport in 94 got hit. Football nearly had a lockout. Basketball had a referee's lockout, and they almost lost games. And hockey, hockey didn't last. The start of the 94-95 hockey season was canceled till January 95. So, yeah, there was a lot of problems in 94 with sports and all that being, high impact. But, yeah, they say that they wanted the home runs. They wanted to give baseball back their voice. Bud Selig, you're a piece of shit. And that's not including what you did to try to ruin the Expos. Jeffrey Loria as Montreal owner. Have you no shame? Number 2 is Pete Rose's gambling ban. Pete Rose is a legend for the Cincinnati Reds. 1963, he was there as a rookie, and in 1986, he played his final game. 23 years. Great player for the Reds, the Big Red Machine, Charlie Hustle, as they call him. Then he became a Philadelphia Philly, part of the Wheeze kids, as in those over-the-hill guys that got to the World Series in 1983, alongside Joe Morgan and a few other players, and Steve Carlton, I guess. Rose actually spent half a season with the Montreal Expos, dude. Bet you didn't know that, but he did. He played for the 84 Expos for half a year. He did get his 4,000th career hit as a member of the Expos, and then went back to Cincinnati to become player manager. He looked pretty good, but then by 1989, there was a report, the John Dowd report, and all that. If you know John Dowd in video games, that's the guy. Because John Dowd in MVP Baseball was Barry Bonds. But of course, Barry Bonds didn't have his name licensed. Anywho, Pete Rose was booted in 1989. He met with Bartlett Giamatti, the baseball commissioner who came in after Peter Ueberroth. And then, there was some kind of secret deal that wasn't executed because a week after Giamatti banned Pete Rose, he died. Pete Vincent refused to do anything about it with Pete Rose, and so did Bud Selig, and so did Rob Manfred for the Wild Beat. So anyway, the worst part was Rose was betting on games, which you can't do. But the worst part was he was betting on his own team. And there were times he would bet on them to lose. There's a lot of debates over the Hall of Fame eligibility, and a lot of people say he should not have been named to the Hall of Fame and all that. He still got some stuff. He couldn't take part in any baseball-like activities, although Major League Baseball allowed him back for the 1999 MLB All-Century team and all that. He could be on that thing, but he just couldn't be in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose has recently passed, and a lot of people now are saying Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame because Rob Manfred made a rule that said, if you're on the permanent ineligible list, as long as you're alive, you don't get into the Hall of Fame, but maybe after death. We'll see what happens. Will Pete Rose get into the Hall of Fame? And finally, number 1 was the granddaddy of the oldest scandal on this list, the 1919 Black Sox scandal. I know you could also say Pete Rose should be number 1, but yeah, for a lot of people, it's the 1919 Black Sox. 8 players fixed the World Series when World Series stuff couldn't be made and all that. They got away with it partially due to the fact that, media was not around. Radio was barely around at that time. But the fact of the matter was that a lot of the players on the White Sox took the money because they were underpaid. Charles Comiskey was a tight-fisted owner who basically forced his team to pay their own laundry bills. That's why they're dirty uniforms, and they were called Black Sox in the first place. Say what you want, but I think Comiskey being cheap kind of helped the White Sox guys turn to the gamblers, like Abe Goldstein, or what is that? Abe, not Abe Patel. Arnold Rothstein. That's it. And all that. You had like legends like Shoeless Joe Jackson, Eddie Saccott taking bribes and all that to throw the World Series and all that. The White Sox were in trouble. They actually were being stiffed by the gamblers, so they decided to play to win. After a few wins in Game 8, was a best of 9, 5 out of 9. The White Sox got their money, and basically there were threats. You can't get out of this mess now. And so the White Sox did that. I can't remember who was the White Sox guy who didn't gamble, but he didn't alert officials. I can't remember. But yeah, Charles Comiskey refused to believe it, saying the World Series could not be fixed. But Commissioner Landis made it well known that using the White Sox like Shoeless Joe and Saccott as examples, that no man who undertakes gambling should be in the Hall of Fame and should be in baseball in general. So he had to make an example. It was a good example, and baseball should not have been bought. Unfortunately, with the whole gambling sites taking over the four major sports, you're going to be bound to see those betting scandals, including Emmanuel Clase, the Cleveland closer, now alleged taking bribes. What are you expect? Anyhow, I'm going to do.